It's the fourth morning on my wilderness ceremony, and I got up before dawn and just sort of contemplating with the sun as it rose over that beautiful plateau over there. And I was reflecting on one of the phrases of my intention for this ceremony, which is the phrase that says, I actively dismantle old oppressive systems. I was trying to get to the heart of that, and I was trying to get to a different way of approaching it, talking about it, that makes sense to me, resonates with me. And I'm talking, what do I mean by old oppressive systems? In some way, I'm talking about all of those isms that we talk about, this, patriarchy, sexism, racism, homophobia, and then the context in with which all of these are interwoven is capitalism, extractive industrial capitalism, and what goes along with that, imperialism and colonialism. And so all these movements that are on the ground right now, actively dismantling parts of these: anti-racist work, decolonial work, anti-capitalist work, are doing it from all sorts of angles. I'm trying to find my angle. And then I started thinking about what I read this quote from Gary Snyder, and I think he had some piece or essay that I read a couple years ago called The Etiquette of Freedom. And there's a line in there about, hey, young lads and ladies, what if you have any insight into where the secret heart of the growth monster is, please let us know so we know where to aim our arrows. So I launched with that image of the secret heart, sacred heart of the growth monster, of capitalism, of all of this, all of these, you call them systems. They're really their own ossified story and wounded stories that live and have a big life in the world at this time. And I wanted to imagine what the secret heart is. What is the sacred wound? And from there I went, what is the sacred shining wound of capitalism, where we might fling our arrows? And in my approach, fling our wild arrows at this sacred shining wound of capitalism, the sacred shining wound of racism, the sacred shining wound of sexism, the sacred shining wound of patriarchy, the sacred shining wound of homophobia and colonialism. What is going on there? What is the root wounding? And I haven't figured it all out, but I think that there's a deep wounding of disconnection and separation at the heart of all of these, and as a consequence, this sort of othering. So we can think of, I don't know, homophobia as an othering of someone who is queer or gay. They're not me, and not only that, but they're not wrong. And inherent in all of these things is this inability and unwillingness to see the needs of the other. So in sexism, for example, I'll take myself as an example. I have in the past simply not heard the needs of, for example, a partner that I was with. I didn't hear it, and it became about my needs, my emotional safety, my needs. And so that dominated the energy, that dominated the space, that dominated what was going to go down. And in all these, anti-racist work and anti-decolonial work, we talk about centering the voices of marginalized voices, historically, indigenous peoples, people of color, because the voices have been marginalized, the needs were not honored. And I zoom up to the big scale of this giant system we're in called, for lack of a better word, extractive capitalism. I think that's one word for what's going on, but it might be bigger than that. But I'm looking at what is going on there with the sacred wound. There is an inherent, obvious disconnection with the land, with our source of life. Essentially, our source of life in our home. We have a transactional relationship with it, an extractive relationship with it, a non-I-thou relationship with. Even my use of the word "it" is problematic in the English language because it objectifies that. And so there's this sacred wound there of disconnection. And thereby we can other it. We other it, and then we don't have to regard its needs or its wants or its soul. Essentially, we don't care about it. We don't honor it, and we take from it. And so our needs matter. And so I'm trying to get to what it would mean to throw wild arrows at these sacred shining wounds and the secret heart of these monsters. Well, in shadow work, we know that we have to integrate it. It's not enough to smash the monster or cut off the head of the monster sometimes. So this phrase that you may have heard, I've heard, smash patriarchy. Great. I've been down for that. Smash it. I sink into that and I realize I understand that impulse. Tear the fuck down. But you can't smash patriarchy. It has to be transformed from the inside. And that's a hard sell. It's easier to smash things. And I get it. We need to smash. What we need to do is compost patriarchy. We need to compost capitalism. We need to integrate all of these wounded stories we're living and potentially harness the power and vitality that it might have for the wild purpose of healing and holding the world and finding a new relational paradigm where we honor who let's say you are, no matter if you're a redwood or a wetlands or an indigenous community or a non-binary gender person who, and we use this word who, if we have this sort of basic bedrock understanding of who, mean we inherently can relate soul to soul, heart to heart, and we are now in conversation and not in a standoff or a mere one-sided transactional taking. So, not sure where all that's going for me, but when I think of the holy purpose, the wild purpose that that the phrase that was given to me was holding the holy holding, or holding the holy wholeness. I can't help but think of how can we bring all of those monsters into the biggest circle in order to transmute that energy into something that works for everybody, and including everybody, human and other than human, that is our home on this planet. And Michael Meade and others, including myself, consider this moment as a collective initiation. All the signs are here. We are already in crossing threshold. We're already in the descent, and it's coming in waves, and it's coming, like this gigantic, slow descent. There's, of course, peak moments within that, but we're already there. And I was on the Wilderness Guides Council gathering last week, and towards the end, on the North Shield Day, there was a prompt about envisioning not only, what is the work we're called to do in the world, but what is the work that the Wilderness Guides Council is called. And at that moment, I actually didn't come up with anything too profound other than what we do. But today, what occurred to me was that if we are indeed in a collective initiation, and that initiation is a step into our wholeness, reclaiming parts of ourselves, among other things, then it's incumbent upon the wilderness guides, all healers. We can't get caught up in the forms sometimes of these things. Whatever your approach, whatever angle you're coming from, whatever your calling is, we have the now responsibility for helping to provide the tools for an initiation. So I had this image of, what if we bringing capitalism out on the land, and in the circle, bringing racism out on the land and in the circle, etc., and holding the space for them to go out on the land to claim their wholeness, and giving them the tools to become initiated, and thereby the transformation becomes from the inside. Because it's not, these things, these isms are not just some abstract thing out there. They're embodied in people. There's no I'm gonna go hunt the capitalism. It doesn't exist outside of how we're all participating in it. And we're all participating in it. And we're all participating in colonialism. And we're all participating in racism. And et cetera, et cetera. So I'm just, as a thought experiment, what does it mean to take these isms out on the land in initiation, and to do the descent, the west descent, where we're in the darkness and in the labyrinth and in the cave, and we're confronting monsters, and we are also confronting the sacred wounds, and we are also in need of lots of tools for that, so that we can pivot to the north, and so that we can claim the east and the west as well, meaning claim facets of ourselves and embody our wholeness for the healing of all. This is a co-liberatory project we're in. It's a co-liberatory project we're in. That's the experiment right now. And there's going to be a lot more descent and a lot more darkness and a lot more labyrinth before this thing is through. So what can guides, healers, whatever, mentors, wherever you're coming from, what can we do to provide the tools? And in this field, I'm particularly thinking about how can we, we have to learn how to look in the mirror. In the cave, we're going to be confronted with aspects of ourselves. How can we help people have the courage to look in the mirror? How can we have to have uncomfortable conversations with ourselves. Yes, uncomfortable conversations with everybody, but also first with ourselves. How can we approach monsters in the sacred wound in the shadows in a way where we transform it by integrating it? How can we approach the wounding in a way that transmutes it into the sacred gift? So if one of the sacred wounds is our severance, is our disconnection, the lie of disconnection, and all of the ramifications of that in this culture, then we have to find what that it looks like. And we first have to just look at it. And then we have to feel it. I have more to say about providing the tools, but just a thought that came earlier that I wanted to get on here was, by necessity, the growth monster, the extractive industrial capitalism, is perpetual, and it by necessity has to go outside of itself and take things in order to be fed. And because people are in that, they're by necessity going to be in types of work that is unfulfilling and unpurposeful and wounding in some ways. And so the system also by necessity has to create endless opportunities for addiction and distraction as an attempt, not that it really does it, but as an attempt to mitigate the pain of the wounding. So it's just going to proliferate, and so these are interlocking patterns within the bigger system. It's of necessity that these things have to go together, it seems to me, because we haven't got to the root of it. We haven't got to that root core wounding. So anyway, back to the tools and methods that those who see themselves in a guiding or healing or whatever role for this collective initiation, we need to start talking really big and explicit about these tools for the descent, because we don't learn these things. Sometimes we stumble upon them if we're lucky by ourselves or have someone in our life or books. But let's come together and find ways to hold this holy holding and hold the circle for people as we go through this descent, and there's going to be enormous confusion, enormous grief. And our role there too is to hold that space for feeling that. Because if there's not the space for that, what's going to happen, and what just always happens, think of your own life, what happens is we're going to flee that necessary West self-reflection. That's what we want to avoid it. We want to flee. And so what will happen is we're going to want to get back to normal. And whoever provides a solution, whatever it is, we're going to be jumping towards that. A lot of people, and maybe they're the easy things, maybe they're the comfortable things, maybe they're the things that just reinforce the very system that we are trying to transmute. So the other side of this, for as way showers or guides or healers, you see the tone in my voice with way showers. I was kind of sarcastic, I realized, and I wasn't fully claiming that I think was going on there. So the lesson here is we have to claim whatever tools, wisdom, knowledge that we have and embody it. And we have to stay in our center for this moment of holding. And because if we're not in our own center and fully staying with our eyes on our wild purpose, we will get out of ourselves. We're going to get pulled out of ourselves. And then we cannot hold the space for all of the processes that need to happen in order for us to get through the descent and begin to climb out. Once things are integrated, composted, healed, looked at, and transmuted. Maybe I already said transmuted. Anyway, those are some morning thoughts. I hope some of this makes sense to me later, and I hope it makes sense to you for what it's worth. Blessings.